Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach Mates. Round 3 is done and dusted and our first week of head-to-head is over on SuperCoach. So we're just going to get straight into it. So first of all, before we get stuck in, we're just going to do a quick recap of our weekend. So I'll start with you, Thomas. So how was your weekend and give us your best and worst player of the week?
Pretty much scored the best. It wasn't the highest score of the 3 weeks I've had, but it was definitely the highest score of that round out of us. So I'm pretty sure I scored 220, which wasn't too bad, which again, half my ranking. Well, not halved it, almost halved it to 14K, which is tracking nicely. I'd say pretty much all the 3 trades I brought in, so Heaney, Cripps and Bowie, all impressed, so no problems there. Dud of the week, it was probably tough because I didn't really have anyone that shit the bed too much. It probably say Zach Butters when he scored a 58, and practically everyone owned him. So nothing really went wrong on my end, but we'll flip it over to you guys because I know you guys suffered a little bit with captaincies and things like that.
And Jonas, same thing, just how you went, best player and dud.
Yes, scored the 2185 roughly this week, which put me into top 13K. So weak. At least we're moving up. I think I moved up another 1.5 thousand. So that's all you can really ask for. As for best player, probably Jordan Dawson once again. Should have been scaled up a bit more, I feel.
Don't know how he wasn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, as for a player who let me down, he wasn't on my field, but I was hoping he'd make a bit more cash gen, but that's probably dried up now with a 23, and that's Dylan Stevens. So hopefully he retains his spot and can reignite some cash generation. How about you, Nathan?
Yeah, he definitely needs to. Well, I actually thought I did okay this week, but I've actually scored the lowest. So I only got 2124. My best player of the week, hard to go past Stephen Canelio. Getting 149 at $260,000 is just a masterpiece. And if you don't own him, I don't know what you've been doing. Dud of the week, Jack McRae. I'm going to knock him. I know he's X-Factor player. Only scored the 92, other vice captaincy on him. And obviously, I think we're going to have a chat about him at some point. But I will give another dud to... Zach Butters only got the 58, which was disappointing. But I'm not going to go out on him. I'm going to blame his bloody teammate, Sam Power Pepper, who literally cleaned him up after he won the ball and cleaned him up in the first quarter. And basically, I think he was on about 20 at halftime. So he did quite well to get to 58. So that Sam, don't be running into your own teammates, honestly.
I think we had a few people message me about what was going on with Butters, but yeah, he got cleaned up, so nothing to worry about there.
Sam Power Pepper absolutely lined him up, and instead of taking out, I don't know who it was, the Adelaide player, he took out Butters and cost everyone else. So anyway, so we're just gonna get stuck into our agenda now. So someone who these two don't have, which they would have been happy this week to not have him, is Jack McRae, who only got the 92, as we said, and more concerningly, when the game was sort of on the line, he went out on the wing and only got 2 centre bounce attendances in the fourth quarter. Do we think this is a concern going forward, Thomas, that there's just so many options in that Bulldogs midfield that this might happen with someone like McRae from time to time?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say this was the excuse I didn't bring him in, but the excuse is because I'm a St Kilda supporter and I wanted to steal. That's pretty much the answer. But it's a bit, I wouldn't say it's a huge concern. It might be a little bit of a concern considering that they did so well against Sydney. And I don't know if that's a correlation to McRae moving into a wing and maybe Trelaw more on ball with Liberatore and Dunkley. A bit more of grunt in there, and you got class on the outside with McRae's one of the best kicks in their team. But as I said, I think it's also a correlation with Sydney also not leaking as many midfield points to opposition. You just have to go and look when they played the Cats the week before, Dangerfield barely scored as well. So it's kind of hard to tell. You're only looking at a 1-game sample size when McRae spent on a wing. So it'd be a lot more interesting if it was a similar scenario and he scored maybe a 100 to 110 next week. Then you might be a little bit concerned. But he's so consistent. If that's his flaw, then I wouldn't be too concerned at all. So owners, I wouldn't worry about it. But just for non-owners like myself and Jonas, makes it a little bit easier to bring him in, I guess, in a couple of weeks' time when he's got that still in his price cycle.
Yeah, and someone else who's doing the opposite to Jack McRae and he's scoring off the charts is Tim English, who's always been an enigmatic player, I guess. He's had his problems with Luke Beveridge, who hasn't probably trusted him, but I think this is finally his breakout season. And 152, so I think he now would be just about the highest scoring forward after 3 rounds. Is he now a must-have, and would you consider getting rid of Max Gawn if you had him to get in Tim English? Jonas?
He's a must-have in the sense that if you have an underperforming player like Marshall or Gawn, you trade to them if that's what you want to do. But I think at the moment you should be conserving trades. Like I wouldn't be trading out a Grundy, for instance, to try and reach Tim English or a Butters or someone like that. So it's only a viable option and pick if you've got someone who you know is going to sky or plummet in price and you want to pick English up, who I think will definitely be a top 6 forward, but I'm not sure if he can keep up this sort of scoring for the whole season against some of the established ruckmen. So one that's a pretty good pick and should make some money. I'm just not sure exactly what his floor is when Martin comes in, so that sort of concerns me a bit, which makes him not a must-have.
Yeah, and I'm on here now. He is currently the highest scoring forward after round 3, so he's definitely in a rare vein of form, Tim English. So I think if you're looking for a premium ruck forward, I think he's probably the way to go. So we're going to move on to Nick Blakey now, who scored 96 on the weekend and has a low score of 79. Is this guy a genuine option down back as a cheaper Premo? And what does he do with Justin McInerney in the side? Well, I'm going to throw this to Thomas straight away because Thomas was a ex-McInerney earner and cost him, and you've been sort of hyping up Nick Blakey off camera. So what do you think about Blakey as a bit of a budget premium, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if the listeners weren't aware that I had McInerney in round 1, Blakey was the other option, or one of the 3 options I was pondering, which obviously Blakey would have allowed me to facilitate some other moves, which wouldn't have been too bad. So, yeah, it's an interesting one because I think Longmuir's trust him off that half-back flank to allow him to roam up and down pretty freely. Like, yeah, I think it gives him license to basically just get the ball and run and kick it forward, which is obviously quite SuperCoach friendly. I do have my doubts when McInerney comes back into that side because McInerney, I think essentially what Blakey did against the Dogs is pretty much what McInerney is going to do. McInerney, I think, is a bit more better by foot and has a bit more elite foot skills. Having said that, I think both of them might do quite well off the half-backs moving into the wings. But it's one of those things where, you know, if you have him, then well done, because obviously you've gained a pretty good player and he's obviously gone up in price. The one doubt I have on him, obviously, as well, is his scoring potential. I don't know if he's got the potential to move into the 100s to 110s like a Hewitt. Like, for example, we'll talk about Hewitt later, but he was in like 35 at halftime and basically ended up on 111, so a 70-point turnaround. So it seems like Blakey doesn't really have the scoring potential to push for that. So I wouldn't necessarily say he's a keeper by any means, but he's still going to make some good cash. But I'd want to see with McInerney in the side what exactly happens with Lloyd as well and how the structure works there, because definitely when all 3 are in the side, Blakey's probably the lowest score out of the 3. But having said that, Blakey and McInerney did top score in their aiming match, and Lloyd was in that side. So, yeah, it's tough to say, but I would say if you've missed the boat on him, I definitely wouldn't be moving anyone to bring him in unless you've got some serious problems down back that you need to bring in a cheaper player that could score for you. But I definitely wouldn't bring him in, say, from McCartan, for example, if you're still looking for an upgrade and he's your only option for sure.
Yep, and someone else who sort of perhaps had a bit of a quieter game was Isaac Heaney, who we touched on last week as being a must-have in the forward line. Only scored the 88 against the Bulldogs, and a big part of his scoring was I think he scored 8 goals in the first 2 weeks, and he only scored 1 goal on the weekend. So where does this leave us with Isaac Heaney going forward, Joan? Is he still a must-have? Or does this sort of concern you a bit that he's only scored 80 with only 1 goal?
I think he's a pretty good option based on his fixture coming up. He's got like North Melbourne and West Coast in the next few. So I'm expecting a few 120s. So he's certainly a good option, and he's probably riskier than Tim English because he's more injury prone and a bit more volatile, but I think his best makes him one of the best forward options you can have. But with Papley not back this week, he'll still be spending a bit more time forward, which could be actually good this week against North Melbourne. It could mean he kicks a fair few goals. But once again, I'm not going to move mountains to pick Heaney. I'm going to conserve my trades and wait until my rookies make enough money before I make moves. And I'll have to painfully sit through some good scores, but equally in saying that, he could get injured or score an 80 or a 70 and then sort of hold his cash generation. So there's one where I wouldn't go near if you've already got some good forwards and you've used some trades. But if you haven't used any trades and you've got someone in the forward line that's underperforming, he's certainly not the worst option you can pick.
Yeah, well, I think if you listened to our podcast last week, I think the same answer here still applies with that. I think if you've got Dunkley and Butters, I think you can afford to leave Isaac and just get him at the right moment. But if you've only got one of them, I think you probably should think about bringing one of them in. All right, so we're going to talk about Jake Bowie, 89, and obviously he's someone who's really benefited from Christian Salem not being in there. I know, Thomas, you actually own Jack Bowie, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think about Bowie long term, or is he going to be in your side just for a little bit of cash generation to get up to someone else?
Yeah. It was a last minute decision, literally like an hour before the game. I decided to pull out Sheffield. And bringing Bowie saved me 100k, allows me to pull a few things this week if I feel like it, or save the 100k in the bank for another week. Definitely impressed me. Obviously, the first time I've watched him not up close, not being live, but paying a bit more attention to see how he went. He definitely was a little bit concerning at times because it definitely seemed that he wasn't getting too much of the pill. But he definitely grew to the game. And one thing I definitely noticed, I'm just going to drag up the stats here on Fan Footy, but he definitely got, he was very, economical with the points per possession. So he only had 18 disposals, 7 marks, 3 tackles, and he went 83% by foot, which is not too bad at all. And at one point, it was 100% by foot. So he's very effective by kick. He's definitely a very lethal kick. And I was talking to a mate off there, not obviously you two, but someone else who was watching it as a Bowie owner himself, and he was quite impressed. And he mentioned that he could be 100+ score, as we mentioned here, that he wasn't stuck on the bench for about 10 minutes in that last quarter. He started on the bench. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I'm definitely happy to own him. I think if you don't own him, this is your last chance to get him if you feel like it. But it's one of those things where he's pretty good on the ball, and he's still taking that Salem role for a while now. Salem's still out for a few more weeks at least. So it's definitely, I think, pretty confident he'll make to 400k, which makes it a real easy swap to a Premo at that stage. And hopefully the likes of Aaron Hall might dip now with his shit score on the weekend. So he's definitely one that I think if you didn't, you probably missed out on maybe a bit of a cash gem, but it's not break the glass moment at all, and you need to bring him in this week. But he's definitely quite impressive. He passed the eye test on all accounts, and he's one I'm happy to have on my side at the moment.
Yeah, we've just got his stats up here now. So 83% with his disposal efficiency and 82% time on ground. I guess the only problem with him might be what does he do once Salem comes back in?
Yeah.
But he probably shouldn't be in your side once Salem's back in.
Yeah, well, hopefully,
mate,
he's above 400k by then, and you can easily side swap to a Premo that's fallen, I guess.
So going back to the slide, so someone who I think someone had on, I definitely had this guy for most of my preseason. Unfortunately, I had to get rid of him for money, and structure was Clayton Oliver, who's flying at the minute, another 146. Is this someone who everyone's missed out on, or is this a case of simply just being squeezed out by better options, Jonas?
I wouldn't consider him a better option than, say, Tuke Miller or Jack McRae. It's just the fact that Miller literally got double tagged. So I'd like to see in 2 weeks when Oliver comes across De Boer and Ash what he puts out, and see if he can actually overtake Miller's 76. That will be interesting. So I don't really regret bringing in Tuke Miller over Oliver. He's had some pretty easy victories and he's scored well. Yes, but he hasn't really faced much stern opposition. So in 2 weeks, I look forward to his price dipping a bit and then being able to pick him up. I mean, it's almost good that Miller has his poor score now and then his price can rise again before upgrade season properly begins, because he was 140 and then the tag or the double tag, whereas Oliver scored 146 against Essendon. I mean, Neil scored 200, so it's not really that indicative of him being, say, better than a Tuke Miller or a Jack McRae. But nonetheless, a really good option and one that you can certainly pick up, but I'd be waiting until he's played GWS in round 5 before I'd go near him, because he is a bit more volatile in the sense that he can score under 100 here and there more frequently than a few of the other mid-primers.
Yeah, so I'm just on here now. So just speaking about, so the top 8 midfield so far is very, very interesting. So I've got Lockie Neal at 1, and then Boak, Tom Green, Patrick Cripps, Andrew Brayshaw, Ben Keys, Christian Petrarca, and then Clayton Oliver's at 8. So right now he's in the top 8. And then there's a few other names. So McRae's 9, Hugh at 10, Miller 11, and Dunkley 12. So it's definitely a bit of a different makeup this stage in the top 8. But I definitely think Oliver will be up there come the end of the season. So Nick Martin, came out of the blue, scored like 120 on debut, and he backed it up with another 71, which for a $102,000 forward isn't the worst result. And I think he actually has the lowest break even this week. I think it's like negative 140 something ridiculous. Negative 124. Is this guy a genuine option at F6, which is actually what I did this weekend? I actually put him at F6 and moved Rochelle and De Koning off. I've put this one to you, Jonas. What do you think about Nick Martin at F6 at the minute?
Yeah, he's certainly safer than Rochelle. I also fielded him over Rochelle because of the amount of possessions he got in round 1. And he was able to back that up with a solid 70. With Rochelle, I wasn't sure against Port Adelaide how he would go. And I mean, he probably should have gotten a score of 50 in the end, which he still would have lost out. But I'd rather be fielding rookies who aren't reliant on scoring goals and having clutch moments, but rather just cover the ground well and pick up possessions along the way and a safe like 70 score at least, which is what Nick Martin is, whereas there's a lot more ambiguity with what sort of score you're going to get with Rochelle. It could be a 95 or it could be as you saw this week, a 35. So unless Rochelle is playing a really easy team, I'd be fielding Nick Martin, and this week I'd still be fielding Nick Martin because he's playing Rochelle's team, but I think Adelaide are a pretty easy team to score upon, so I'd be leaning in favour of fielding him again.
Yep, I think I'm going to leave Martin at F6. So someone else who did well was Jordan Ridley, who I think's given some coaches a few headaches over the first couple of weeks, but he got 115 on the weekend. Is this what we can expect from his scoring going forward, or is this just a case of just scoring while Zach Merritt's out? Thomas?
It could have a slight correlation. I think it might be, but he definitely dominated against Melbourne. Definitely looked like his old self, rebounded everything, intercept marks galore. The only concern is, I think, I watched that game pretty close. I had that on the TV Friday night. And I was a little bit disappointed, obviously not a non-Ridley owner, but only a 115 from a performance that probably looked like a 140. Probably was a bit disappointing and just a bit of question marks on his ceiling of what he can do. It was a pretty messy game on both counts of both teams. I think both defenders. Stephen Mayer also popped out a good SuperCoach score as well. So a good day for intercept markers. Just a little bit concerned about his role still, exactly what that pertains. Obviously, I think it probably helps with Merritt out. I think it really was used as a bit more of a further down option. But now I wouldn't be surprised with Merritt out for 8 to 10 weeks. It'd be a good showing for Ridley, and I think it's good that people get stuck fat with him. Just a quick one on Martin. I noticed he was also playing in the back line at times as well. So it's one that I think he can flip a bit like Carl Langford, how he can kind of change positions a fair bit in that side. And he's a prolific ball winner, I think. He just knows where the ball is, knows how to get it. It's pretty clean by foot. Had 18 disposals for 71 SuperCoach points. Isn't too bad at all when he got flipped into the forward line late in the game and didn't do much. But yeah, he can get the ball for sure. And I think he's a very safe option on field. I know I'm in another chat with some other people on Facebook off air, and they were hyping up Martin pretty well. So I think he's a pretty safe option on field, much better than Rochelle for sure.
Yep, and of course we've got Jonas's love child in here, so we'll have to throw this question to him. So Dawson finally got moved back into the back line. Top score with 123. I think we all said off camera this should have been about 130. Interestingly, he ran like 50 metres to go and take the final kick, and I think Joshua Shelley wanted to take the final kick, so I definitely think that Nix was happier that Dawson took the kick. But is this a week where we're all going to jump on the Dawson train with you, Jonas, or this role's still too volatile?
I think the role's volatile, but he has a lot of scoring outlets. Like, he takes kick-ins. He's kicked a goal at least in every game. He plays on the wing a bit, and he's just got a really good kick. So his scoring avenues are certainly there, unlike, say, Ridley, who relies on intercepts and just kick-ins primarily. Dawson gets his points all over the field. As for a must trade in target this week, I don't think so, because he's got a high-ish break even at 103, and he's one, or 102 actually. He's one that should be top 6 defender, but probably one that you don't need a trade in at the moment, because there'd be better value options down the line and players that are going to either skyrocket in price or once you pick them up, or players like, for instance, Callum Mills, Marcus Bontempelli, who'll be low 600s and even high 500s in a few weeks, that I'd rather be anticipating for, because I think in the long run they should be scoring more than Dawson. I think you can pick Dawson up at around this price at a later stage in the year, which means he's not really a must trade in for this week.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that Thomas's man Dan Houston's actually exactly the same total points as Dawson at the minute. So there's two boom plays for you. So someone who I'd mentioned just before as being, I think, a top 2 midfielders, Travis Bogue. Thomas, can he keep up this incredible start to the season where he's averaging, I think it's like 146? Is that sustainable, or is he going to come back down to the pack? I know last year he started like this, and I think he only ended up with about 115 average. So is that more realistic, or can he genuinely keep up this sort of 140 plus scoring?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's sustainable. You just have to look the likes of Heaney score averaging 140 in the first 2 rounds. Cripps averaging crazy numbers, and he dropped off a little bit. But Bogue, yeah, started the house on fire in the first 3 rounds as well. So last year he scored 160 against the Roos, 120 against the Bombers, and 104 against the Eagles, and dropped right off. Obviously this year is pretty nuts. Like lowest score 133 is insane numbers. Apparently he's fitter than ever, so who knows? It's one that I think if you're brave enough, you probably would have maybe jumped on last week after seeing 2 ridiculous scores. But I think you're definitely chasing points if you pick him up now, because he would have had his price rise and jumped up significantly in the 600. So you may as well wait until the likes of McRae, Steele, and Millen, if you haven't picked up one of those guys, pick him up rather than Bogue. But it's definitely one that if you had the balls and picked him up last week, props to you, because he looks incredible. Looks even fitter than last season. And the way Port started, I think that the confidence thing in picking him is Port have started so poorly. So if he's playing the losing side and scoring that well, I mean, who knows when they're up and about and winning a few games. So he's one that I don't think has trade bait. He's very similar to Miller, where he's incredibly fit. I think they go to Ollie Wines instead of Bogue, and Bogue has genuine goal threat as well, can kick the scoreboard, and he's similar to Steele, where he can tackle. So he's one, I think, that it's almost like you've got to pull the trigger if you want him, and it's going to be a definite point of difference. And if he keeps his scoring up, even for the next couple of rounds, you'd be laughing. But he's one that I think too many people are worried about picking him, just because, if you pick him, you use a midfield spot, then if it doesn't quite work out, then you have to sideways, and then by then you've lost a few points there, unfortunately. So it's one that, if you had the balls, go for it, but I probably wouldn't recommend it, just because I think his best 3 scores have gone past him. But who knows? If he keeps it up, then you look like you got egg in your face if you didn't pick him.
Yep, and just a final point here on Port Adelaide. So Jackson Mead. So is this someone who we missed out on? I would love to have my time back again and get him in instead of Josh Ward, who I hope we're going to talk about at some point. But is Jackson Mead someone who I think most people missed out on, Jonas?
I mean, in round 2, he was the sub and scored 18. So, I mean, yes, he had a good game this week, and he'll probably make
break-evens -3.
Sorry?
His break-evens -3.
Yeah, so I don't know. He's one where I wouldn't sideways award to get him in, for instance, but like I'm much happier that I've picked McDonald, who's got a break even of -14 over Mead, because Port's team is pretty strong, but he didn't put a foot wrong and should make some good money. But the fact he was on the fringe of the best 22 at the start of the year, and then that was shown by the fact that he was the sub in round 2, means you can't really predict that. Like,
yeah,
he had a good week, but in saying that, Josh Ward could come out this week and score 85, and then his cash gen is sparked up again. So yeah, I wouldn't be. You're only trading to Mead if you think he's going to make 150,000 more than the person you're trading out, and I don't think he's going to be making 150,000 more than any other rookie, unless it's a loophole such as Owens, in which instance I'd probably just hold and use as a VCC loophole, given how uncertain some of the captaincy options are these days.
Yep, I think that's fair. Obviously, I wasn't considering trading out Josh Ward. I just highlighted, I think Mead's looking like a better pick at this stage, given that where Mead started and where Ward started. But so I think this is Tim Taranto, yeah, isn't it? Is that Tim Taranto? Yeah. Okay, I thought it was. So sorry about that. That's my IQ knowledge on the Giants. So low score of 88. Is Tim Taranto worth bringing in as a point of difference player with Green returning soon? Jonas, I might put this one to you. What do you think about Taranto?
He's one who's probably a bit more durable than Heaney, and he's consistent. He's got the runs on the board, but it's a tough question because who are you? You're taking him over what? You're not taking him over a Dunkley. You're not taking him over a English or a Butters necessarily. Maybe you can make an argument for Butters, but not Heaney, English, or Dunkley. And if you've got those three, I don't know why you'd be bringing in a fourth premium forward at this stage. I'd be looking at more value in other lines. So he's a bit of a butcher as well. So he'll score 70 eventually and then wait a few weeks and then bring him in. So I think you also want to see proof that he's playing more midfield when Toby Green does return before pulling the trigger. So no, I'd be waiting on Taranto.
Have we actually already got a fourth premium forward? Can we consider Stephen Cornelio to be one?
Yeah,
probably,
he is one.
Yeah, I'd take it. Cogs will be, I think, top 6 forward at this point.
So do we need Taranto then, or is that just, or are we just gonna stick with Cornelio? Because like right now, Cornelio's F3 for me. If we bring in Heaney or English, then Cornelio goes to F4, and then you're pretty much set there if you've got another couple of good rookies next to him. So
yeah,
I think
it means you're missing out on Seri or Brodie. You can't be fielding all of them so early on. So I'd be looking at a midfielder and then trying to bench, say, a Ward or a Stevens if I'm at M8.
Yeah, so
you can swing Taranto into the midfield, but there are better options in the midfields in the next coming weeks.
Well, you just have to look at just quickly. I've just got the stats up with Taranto. Like, he scored 112, which on paper looks impressive. But if I told you guys that he had 36 disposals, 3 marks, 8 tackles, 1 goal, you'd probably be expecting close to 150. And the reason he scored 112, even though he had 6 clearances, he had 12 claims and was going at 63%, which is probably normal for Taranto standards, unfortunately. So, and he's always been known to be pretty terrible by foot. So he's one of the things that probably holds him back a bit because you're paying probably premium for a score like that, but it's not necessarily the scores, which is the issue, because you'd be happily taking a 112 from a forward. It's the way he does it. Like, if he's getting 36 disposals, he's not going to get 36 disposals every week.
No.
So it's like if you got 20 disposals and had 12 clangers, all of a sudden that's probably a 60. So it's one of those things that's always been a hit on Taranto. He's much better in fantasy than SuperCoach, because obviously SuperCoach taking an effective kicks and things like that. But if he butchers a ball like that, you definitely have a bit of a concern with him. When you've got Cogs, who scored 150 off not doing much more, at a lot cheaper price for sure.
Yeah, so obviously for you two would have been distressing Touk Miller basically getting double tagged. And it allowed my mate Matt Rowell to just go around and gather the ball at will, pretty much. Is this a concern if Touk Miller's going to get double tagged, or is this just simply the fact that the Giants have 2 really strong taggers and they just thought that Touk was that good that they just sent them both to him? Since you both got him, I'll let one of you answer.
Yeah, I can start off. Jonas can add in if he wants to add anything. I think Jonas had him as captain, which I was pretty happy with when I saw that, and then saw Touk getting tagged pretty early on by Lockie Ash. So I think De Boer's just a useless footballer that they needed to put him on and Miller. So I think they struggled to find a position for him, and I guess it worked quite effectively. But if you're being double tagged and scored a 76 still, it's not the end of the world. I think GWS is probably the only team that's dumb enough to put a double tag on. But it worked. It clearly worked. But I can't see many other teams doing that, just structure-wise, doesn't really add up. But I wouldn't be too concerned. Maybe if, say, next week another team tags him and it gets the exact same output, you might be slightly concerned how Miller can take a tag. But Miller's so fit that you need two taggers to be rotating to keep him at bay. So it's definitely not panic stations. Lockie Neal had the same concern. Obviously, we'll touch on Brizzy later on, but definitely not a concern for Took being tagged out of the game.
Yeah, and Tom Green right now I think is the 5th highest midfielder. So he scores 164, 106, and 147. Always been a prodigious talent, Tom Green. I think he was a top 10 draft pick and came through the Giants Academy. Is this his year where he can finally burst up into sort of maybe not top 8? I think that's maybe a bit unrealistic, but maybe top 15 midfielders. And is there any concern when or if Taranto comes back into that midfielder that might eat into Tom Green scoring a bit, Jonas?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to make top 8, so I think you've missed the boat on him and he scores, so I wouldn't be chasing points. He's also gone on the end of a few goals, which show that he can play forward at times, and if Toby Green's coming in, I mean, that means he may get more mid-time, but then in saying that, simultaneously, they're going to need to give Taranto a bit more mid-time. So I think he's a great contested player, but he's one where I wouldn't now go picking just because he's now raised in price. He's not probably going to be top 8. He'll be a keeper, but at that price, you're probably looking at players now who are going to be top 8. And the fact he can play a bit forward, what happens when the Giants get decimated one day and he doesn't go so well? So I'm not too sure on the pick. I think good job if you started him, but I'd still be picking, say, if you're tossing up between him and Cripps, I'd still be picking Cripps at the moment.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think Patrick Cripps is 16k more expensive, and I think I'd be safer picking Cripps.
Yeah.
Over Tom Green. So Pat Lipinski. So another 100+ score. Is he still a viable option to bring in if you're on the Jarryd Blair train or an underperforming rookie? Thomas, I'm going to ask you this because I know I think you were someone who was sort of interested in Lipinski a few weeks ago. So are you still keen on Pat, or is he a bit high now in price?
I think he's, how much is he? I think 350k still. So he's not out of the realms of getting.
He's 408.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, he's definitely still mid-price territory. He's one that I'm tempted to bring him in. I have the funds to go straight up to him from Barry, but whether or not is another question. I think they play West. You guys play West Coast this weekend, so I see him going quite big. And he's one that definitely impressed me after a disappointing 86 last week, which wasn't disappointing for his score, but to bounce back against Geelong, who's a pretty tough midfield to score against. He scored 106. He's definitely got the mid role. I don't think he's been pushed out of there in any regards. He's pretty much that one player that basically stays there alongside Taylor Adams the whole time. You guys are Collingwood supporters, so you can go into more detail when you talk about Jack Crisp as well. So he's one that I'm definitely interested in because I could see him scoring, pretty well 90s to 100s. Obviously, you want that to be kind of 110s plus, but I'm also in that other camp of you probably missed the boat if you're paying 400k from all of a sudden now, because at that 400k price, you're looking at a pod and a keeper rather than a stepping stone. So he's one that realistically I probably miss out on, but he's one that I would be against if you brought him in thinking that he's going to continue to scoring 105 plus.
Yep, and obviously on the left here, Jack Crisp, another, I wouldn't say underwhelming, but definitely not what he's capable of scoring. Is this a concern going forward? And is there a correlation between his role and his scoring? Because I think he played more off halfback against who did we play in round 2? Adelaide. He played more off halfback in round 2 and he scored 100+, and he went sort of back to that more midfield role and he scored 85. So what do you think about Chris Jonas, given that you're a Collingwood supporter as well?
Yeah, I don't know why we persist with him in the midfield. He's clearly better down back. I think he was playing midfield in the fourth quarter when we got smashed. And when we kicked those 9 goals in the third, he wasn't really spending much time in the midfield. So I don't know, maybe McRae can do the maths on that one. But I think he's durable and he's one where you just hold, you don't trade, and you don't trade him in. I think he's probably going to go anywhere between 90 and 100 for the rest of the year, and that's just okay. It's not worth burning a trade on to go up to a Hall, for instance, because at least you're getting safety and durability with this guy, and who knows, maybe he might move back down back and start scoring over 100.
Yep, I think that's probably pretty fair as well. So Jarryd Berry, so this is going to frustrate. I think you've both got Jarryd Berry here. So he's on 55 a half time. I remember you two were very, very excited in a group chat that we've got that he's on 55, and he only ended up with 83, which at his price it's okay at his price, but it's not really what you want him in there for. So I'll chuck this to you, Thomas. Is it time to get rid of Berry? Or is there some merit in keeping him?
It's an interesting one because, as I said, I was pretty happy with his score. I think Jonas, she traded him in the end.
Yeah.
So I was the only one that ended up having him, unfortunately. But yeah, he looked pretty good. I mean, the reason I held him was because he was playing North, and as predicted, Brisbane smacked him. So kind of happy was at 35 quarter time, 55 at halftime. I think he got reported for a pretty, soft tap on the stomach to Larky, I'm pretty sure it was. He got reported for that. So I don't know if that scared him off his game a little bit to try and not get any more shit from the umpires. But it's one of those things where playing Geelong, and Geelong's not the best team to score against, so I don't know how that will go, but he's one that I wouldn't be against trading. He's someone that I'm thinking of trading myself if I decide to do true trades or side swap to Brodie or something like that. But yeah, there is a bit of concern there. Just with the fade outs and his scoring, like he had the same issue round one where he scored really well in the first half and completely died off. Obviously had a bit of a shoulder injury, that's why. Round two, similar thing, kind of didn't really do much and got to a 76. So I think his ceiling is a problem. He was one that probably a few people got sucked in with the hype of pre-season where he dominated and got 150s. So it's one of those things where I think maybe because he played wing during pre-season and the ball just was so much more uncontested, so he get a lot of cheap possessions, where it's come to round one, it's a lot more congested in the middle that he really can't get into the outside where Berry can play. So I think for him, at 83, I'd definitely take for that round, but it could have been so much higher, unfortunately, with how badly North played as well.
Yes, and I noticed the next guy here. So I know I spoke about this guy last week, and I kind of put the moz on him. I think you two were spooking him up, and I said he doesn't mind throwing out a 60 or 70. Well, surprise, surprise, Eddie comes with a 70. So if you got rid of Whitfield and got in Hall, obviously Whitfield actually did half decent to get 96. So obviously if you did that trade, that's a disaster. Well, at least this week it is. But Jonas, is this score of 70 only a blip on the radar for Aaron Hall, or is this something that we can perhaps expect him to throw in every now and again going forward, which might put him off being a bit of a good pickup?
The fact he scored 70 wasn't even his fault. I think it's the nature of the game. Here we go. And the fact that Brisbane annihilated them. You look at the other defenders, Zeeble 62, and even bloody Luke McDonald had a 28. So I think that shows that the points weren't there for Hall. I didn't watch much of the game, but I think Brisbane just were all over them. North Melbourne were just a complete rabble, and I don't think Hall had much opportunity to get a lot of the ball and actually distribute it to someone who was in space. I think Tom was saying he had a few clangers, and a lot of the effective kicks he did get were when the game was out of reach. And so stuff like that, that's not going to occur every week where North are losing by 100 points. So yeah, it's one of those games where you can't even really blame Hall because the players around him didn't give him much opportunity to score well.
I will blame him though for one goal, which I did see a video of on the AFL website, and he's basically let Jarryd Lyons just run around him on the mark from 40 out straight in front because he was arguing with a teammate. So I don't think that's normally what he does, but the fact that he's done that is a little bit concerning, because if things aren't going well, is he just going to do this again? And while we're on North Melbourne, I will give another shout out to Tristan Xerri, who got another 81. So I definitely think he is so far probably the best rookie out of all of them, given his scoring and given his price. I think he's definitely the best one so far for a rookie. So Sam Walsh, Ward back 124. Can we bring him in early and get ahead of the pack, or should we wait for his price to drop? Thomas.
Probably wait and see with Walshy. He got the luxury of holding another week before his price rises. But who knows? You go early and really make some ground if he scores a 150 or something like that. He's a prolific ball winner. It seems to definitely, I think now he's got his second game back from injury, definitely helps, and he definitely didn't look like he was slowing down. Obviously, Hawthorn's midfield is probably not the best going around the competition, but I think the likes of Chero, Hewitt and Cripps definitely help him, and 124 is quite impressive. And I don't think he had a heap of it, so it's not like it was the Taranto-esque thing where he just didn't get much. He had, just looking at the stats now, 32 disposals, really effective, kind of an even stat distribution between kicks and handballs, where at times he usually has more handballs than kicks, which kind of hinders his score. But he does have a lot of uncontested stuff, so it's one of those things when you've got Cripps all of a sudden standing up, whereas last year Cripps was nowhere to be seen, so Walsh was obviously a dominating factor. But I think we've probably past the days of Walshy scoring maybe 180s, because you've got like Hewitt, Kennedy, and Cherry all going through there and all doing really well at the moment. But he's one that I think is just going to score well naturally because you've got a pretty strong midfield around him.
Yeah, I'd definitely be holding. His break even's 163, so I definitely think he's someone you can probably wait a week on. So CJ as a point of difference in defence, obviously a very, very good player, great intercept marker. Can we get him as a point of difference, or is his role just too flaky, Jonas?
No, you can't touch him. And on Doherty, he started well, but I have some question marks on whether he can keep it up. Obviously, Saad didn't play. So, I mean, he did score 144 when Saad did play, but with a limited preseason, I have my reservations about how he will pull up come the latter stages of the year. So one I'd probably skip on.
Yeah, and just speaking of Hawthorn's backline, I was pleased to see Sicily got 100 plus with Will Day in the side. So I know Will Day's on his first game back. But I think so far that Sicily pickup so far is proving to be okay. And obviously Sam Doherty, we've already heard Jonas. I'll just quickly, I was going to ask you this, Thomas, but can he keep this up, or is there better options than Doherty?
Yeah, I don't mind the pick. He seems to be the general down back. He obviously ruined McGovern's SuperCoach output, but he's one that, scores really well. He's got a really SuperCoach friendly role, takes a fair few kickouts as well. I think main thing is whether, as Jonas said, can hold up for the remainder of the season as well. It's a long season. I know he's been through hell and back to play, He's done so well to get there, and all credit goes to him. He scores bloody well for a player and to fight cancer and get back on the footy field. But it's kind of a wait and see whether he can maintain it. But he's definitely got a very, very SuperCoach friendly role, and it just helps that the Blues are doing really well as well, which is a bonus.
Great story, Doherty. So who's this? Is this Brad? That can't be Brad Crouch, is it?
Yeah, Brad Crouch.
Is that Brad Crouch? Is it? Okay, there we go. So Brad Crouch, so scores of 112, 96, and 131. Is he going to be? Could he be a point of difference option in the midfield? I know some people were big on him when he first came across. He probably hasn't lived up to the potential, but is he finally starting to show a little bit why St Kilda paid what they did to get him? Thomas, since you're the Saints man, we'll get you.
Yeah. Obviously, I was at the game, which was a bloody good game to watch, and this is the first time that I saw Crouch absolutely tear a game apart. It was much better, much cleaner by foot and hand, and as I've put in the visuals there, I think Gresham and Sinclair's definitely helped him a little bit. It used to be him, Steele, and say Zach Jones, which made Crouch basically a lot more pressure on him to do well. But I think with Gresham now on the side in particular, he's someone that's really flourished and scored nicely. And, he's probably Collingwood and Richmond and Freo, not the three most hardest, midfields in the comp to play against, but he's definitely impressed. He tore Richmond a new one and scored 131 as deserved. So he's one that, I'd say that if you strap for cash and he continues this rich vein of form and St Kilda start to really put some games together and they start putting 4 quarters together, he's one that, who knows, could be a decent pod that you're looking as a cheaper option. But obviously with the midfield, you just want to go with the best, and he's probably one step below that when it comes to SuperCoach scoring. He's definitely keeping up with it now. But as I said, this is a 3-game sample size. So I can see him doing very well. Maybe if you have him in draft, for example, he's a nice player to own for sure. But he's one that I would probably stay away from Classic until you're kind of wrapping up your midfields and say injuries have struck and you really need a strong bench and you need cheaper Premos on field. Then he's one that you can definitely look at.
Yeah, I don't think St Kilda actually paid anything for him now that I think about it, because I think he came over from free agency.
Yeah, it was basically a free agency pick.
Yeah. So, Max King, is he a good option up forward with so many volatile options, or is he just in the same camp? Jonas, what do you think?
No, he's not an option. He's a key forward. I don't care who you are, unless you're Tom Hawkins at a discounted price. You're irrelevant if you're a full forward and you're above like 280k.
Yep, I think that's probably pretty fair. And Willie, not really, Daniel Rioli, is he a valid cheaper option with DPP status? I'm just gonna throw him in the same basket as his cousin. I said last week he was a trap, and I think Daniel Rioli's a trap as well. But what do you think, Thomas?
Yeah, he's probably one I wouldn't go to. You probably would have to pick him. It wouldn't have been a bad pick to start off the season. He's had 2 tons, and for that price, he would have gone ahead of Brodie and Sherry with regards to scoring. But I think with Richmond decimated in most areas, they just look slow, lethargic. He does provide a fair bit of run and carry through the defence, but I think he'll have these low scores of 50s to come when they're really suffering. And I think he's one that's a bit susceptible to be moved around a little bit as well when things go to push and shove. And he's one that could suffer with that. Just quickly on Max King, I think even though you want to stay away with key forwards, he is one that I've now seen, obviously being a St Kilda supporter and watched 3 games in a row. He's one that can tear a quarter apart. So he was on about 25 at 3/4 time and ended up on 100. So he basically got a 79-point quarter, and that's within one sample size. So with King, it's one you probably won't pick because of his awkward price. If he was 100k cheaper and it was 200k, I'd be much more entertained. But he's one that can seriously tear a quarter apart and score 80 points in a quarter just like that. Because it seems like a St Kilda can get their ball movement into the forward 50 a lot cleaner and through Max King's hands, he's one that's basically unstoppable at his height against pretty much any defence. Defenders have to go 2 on him. It's one of those things where with SuperCoach where it kind of falls a little bit apart because teams will start double teaming and things like that. So he's one maybe even next year that you might start as kind of that Tom Hawken-esque where he has the ability to score really well because he scores goals and he's so damaging in the air.
Yeah, I think these key forwards, there seem to be a time to pick them up, and that's sort of when I have a couple of soft targets, shall we say. I know a lot of people used to do that with Lance Franklin back in the day. He'd sort of score around that 70 or 80 mark, and his price would drop, and then he'd come up against like a bottom 2 side. He'd kick like 8 goals, get 180, and then that's people were bringing him in before he got his 180, and then they just keep him. So if a key forward can do that, I think he's probably not the worst option if he can sort of average around the 90 mark, but it's just so hard to do as a key forward. So I'm going to put this one to you as well, Thomas, because I don't think you have Will Brodie. So scores of 115, 17 and 128. Can we pick McGovern this year, given West Coast are just decimated by injury? And does he have a good role?
He's got a very good role, actually. It seems like I've seen a few West Coast games briefly, but it just seems like everything goes through him because the West Coast defenders are just shit, to put it bluntly. They're very young defenders going through there now, and he needs to be the leader down there. He needs to demand the ball now rather than, rely on other defenders to do the dirty work for him. He seems to have picked up the slack a little bit, and it's shown in his scoring. Like, the other issue is that the amount of ball that goes through the West Coast defensive line because they're getting pumped each week definitely helps his scoring because he's just going to get the hands on the footy more often. 300 is in a row. It's not 3 bad hundreds. He's pretty much one of the top scorers in the defence at the moment in the last 3 rounds because he hasn't dropped below 100 or not even close to dropping below 100. So he's one, unfortunately, that I think because you got West Coast players coming back, you just can't really pick him. He'll end up becoming a more, one-on-one defender eventually once they get their troops back and they'll end up scoring a bit lower. But he's one that it's just because the amount of ball that's going through there, he's scoring all right. So if you might have thought of that round 1, it would have been a genius pickup because it makes sense on paper that the more ball down there, the more ball he's going to get. And he's a pretty good mark. He's an excellent mark, and he's a pretty decent kick out. So he's one that you miss the boat. You'd be chasing 100% chasing points if you went for him. And he's about 515k. Maybe we could say 415k, you'd be looking at him. But yeah, 515k definitely passes. There are other options there. But he's one to keep an eye on because if he keeps this up, who knows what happens. But I guess when you don't really know until you got the full West Coast complement of players coming back in.
Yeah, and just finally here, Will Brodie. I'm glad that I kept him because I think after round 1, I think he was sort of a bit on the chopping block. I think he only scored about what did he score in round 1? It wasn't that. Oh no, he got 70. I got 76.
75, I think it was.
Yeah, 76. Yeah. But at his price, he sort of wanted around the 80 mark. And he got 90 on the weekend. But 83% time on ground, which was always his one knock. So I think his first 2 games he was at 60%. Is he someone who is becoming a must-have for non-owners? And would you be jumping on him given that Mundy and perhaps Fife are coming back in the next couple of weeks? Jonas?
If you got him, great. If you don't have him, I wouldn't be getting him in because, Mundy and Fife are coming back as well as Sarong. And with those 3 back, he might get dropped still. So I think if you're bringing him in now, it's a bit of a risk because you're effectively behind the players who started with him, and then you're hoping for an even better output than what he's produced now, considering he's going to have to compete with the likes of some of those midfielders coming back. So I think the ship has sailed on Brodie as a trade-in option, given the fact he's risen in price, and some of those mids are going to start returning sooner rather than later. And he's probably going to be one of the first players that I'm going to use to upgrade, because if his fitness is a concern, that's gonna hinder him later on in the year. And also with some of those players coming back, his bench time could come back. So he's scoring nicely. Hopefully he can pump out a few more 80s before he ripens in price, and then I trade him out, because I think he's going to be one of those players that makes the majority of his cash generation earlier rather than later.
Yeah, I've actually got that same sentiment. I'm actually hoping that Isaac Heaney has another down game, and then Brodie can keep up these 90s for a couple of weeks, and Heaney can drop down to sort of around 400k, and then I think that's just the ideal swap. That's what I'm hoping for anyway, but time shall tell. Now, just looking forward ahead here. So obviously this year's SuperCoach is a bit different. So round 6, we have new DPP players in here. And we've just picked some players out here who we think might get DPP. So obviously, Tristan Xerri, we've touched on him as a ruck, picks up the ruck. I mean, at this rate, he'd almost be worth looking at maybe as an R2 or an R3 if you've got him, given that I don't think he's going to be dropped from that North Melbourne side anytime soon. Angus Brayshaw, who's looking like a good option down back. Jack Sinclair, who I think is looking like a good option in the back line. And Mason Wood up the top there as a midfield forward. Thomas?
Yeah, Mason Wood mid forward.
Yeah. So all of these guys are probably in line to get DPP eligibility after round 6, but obviously we'll know that for sure probably the week afterwards. The other one who's not on here, but someone who I'm very closely monitoring, is Scott Pendlebury for backline DPP. I think right now he's probably top 10 defenders if he was eligible as a defender, and I think at his price, I think he's just below 500,000. I think he might be a good option, possibly as a backline. And that's it. That's all the slides.
Yeah. So no, it was definitely an interesting round for sure. I definitely a few low scores in there as well. It's a tough round for people that have got, the classic Jack McRae vice captain, Lockie Neal captains. It was a pretty rough round all around. There's definitely a few interesting trade options this week. And I've just looking on Twitter as well, look, a lot of people seem like they're going to hold trades, but really depending on teams and whether you want to pull the trigger and really get ahead of the pack. Because it seems like, from now on in, you need to start really being smart about who you trade in to push ahead in the rankings. But just a quick look just had a quick look whilst Nathan was finishing off there towards the end. With our group, we've got about obviously 100 in there, pretty small in comparison to the other podcasts and YouTube groups going around, but it's ranked 31st at the moment, which is really good. Obviously a small sample size which helps us. But yes, the number one ranked player in our group is actually the number one ranked player overall. So that's a pretty impressive feat at the moment. So we'll give a shout out to the Killer Kitties, coached by Catherine. So if you're listening, Catherine, we'd be more than happy to have you on the podcast to dissect your team and see if you can hold that number one spot for a while. You definitely jumped up a fair bit with a really nice score of 24-28 this week. So hopefully you can keep it up. But as you said, reach out to us if you want to have a chat on the podcast for sure. But until then, we'll either catch you later this week for a Q&A if we get around to it, or if not, we'll enjoy the week ahead and catch you for the round 4 review.